Hello again, it's Henry from So Willow. A few months ago, I invited you into our garden space here in Rutland, and I'm delighted that so many of you have asked to see more. You wanted to know how I planned the garden, and several of you suggested adding plant name labels to help identify what's growing here. Such a brilliant idea that I wish I'd thought of myself. So here is the garden in July flowing into August. And the garden has transformed from that mostly green May tour. This is what I was waiting for then. The hydrangeas are finally in full bloom, creating those soft clouds of white dotted with pink anemones, whilst the pheasant's tail grass has developed its beautiful seed heads. They create this wonderfully soft, almost fluffy texture, though I'll admit they can look rather messy and create a tangle. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this grass, but I actually wouldn't be without it. Many of you asked how I planned all of this, so let me take you back to the beginning. It all started with a view from our house, even before we had the extension that gave us this big window overlooking the garden. I knew I wanted to feel enclosed here, surrounded by greenery year-round, somewhere quiet and calming to rest in the evenings and at the weekends, but where wildlife could thrive. I began with sketches. I really believe in putting pen to paper for all my creative outlets, both from the house looking out and an overhead view to divide the space into sections. I used the snowy winter days especially to envisage the garden. It gave me a blank canvas to work with. I had a Pinterest board full of inspiration, but one garden in particular that caught my imagination was by Dutch garden designer Robert Boekema. I loved the spherical shaped shrubs and islands in his designs. After my sketches, I had a 2-hour consultation with the garden designer Guy Petheram, whom had previously suggested the concept of a lawn-free garden, and I already knew Guy is very much a wildlife-friendly garden designer. Guy suggested adding the rebar trellis to our fences. You can see them here, and also suggested adding more horizontal lines to the layout. So when we had our side return extension added, we repurposed the lintels from the windows and doors as horizontal stepping stones. Guy talked me through a list of proposed plants and trees and encouraged me not to be scared of adding trees to a small space. If you can't afford a garden design from scratch, having a consultation with a designer like Guy is a really affordable way to get good advice for your garden layout. Starting at the back of the garden, there is the shed, greenhouse and a bench area separated by the Portuguese Laurel hedge. My husband built the shed using instructions from the Sally Coulthard book. In front of the hedge is the dining area, tucked underneath the blackthorn tree, which has recovered nicely this year after 2 years of not producing any sloes. In front of that we have the birch tree and seating area, which as you can see started off looking rather bleak with just a couple of deck chairs, but is now surrounded by clumping bamboo, climbing roses and grasses, and it gets a good amount of midday sun. Looking back towards the house is our shadiest, driest area under the magnolia tree. This was the last area to be planted up, and we have finally added the bucket pond. You can see how this has changed the view from the house. And lastly is our patio area. This used to be decking, so after the small extension we tackled this area ourselves, laying some reclaimed patio slabs under a pedestal system. It's far from perfect, so landscape gardeners should look away at this point. But this is my favorite spot for a morning coffee. You can really see how the climbing plants have taken over this area, making it cozy, and how much more relaxing it looks when you are surrounded by greenery. The main structure in our garden comes from these two multi-stemmed silver birches, the Portuguese Laurel hedge at the back, and then these Lonicera Nitida dotted around. I'm still shaping these into rounded structures, and it's just something you have to be patient with. I bought them in bulk as bare root hedge plants, which was wonderfully economical. I've also added privet here and there. Here you can see how I laid out the shapes using some string. I really wanted these islands of greenery that you could walk around and that would fill the center of the garden to create pockets of space. Being impatient, I had already started digging up beds and planting the trees before a local supplier of pea shingle helped us to dig up the lawn to lay down the pea shingle. Along with the evergreen structure, I filled the islands and borders with grasses. These zebra grasses act as focal points, and there's the pheasant's tail grass I mentioned, the one with a complex relationship. I probably need to start dividing it and cutting it back more severely in the spring. And here's our little pond and sink tub. It's now completely overgrown with duckweed, but we don't mind as our naughty adolescent rescue dog loves to pull out the duckweed. It keeps him entertained. In summer, this Mentha longifolia, the Buddleia Mint, spreads around wherever it pleases. Let me show you our front garden where you can see this really large verbena. And here in the greenhouse are the self-seeded ones I've been growing on. These actually self-seeded themselves between the paving slabs on our front garden walkway. And here's our little step over hedge of Hedge Germander, which is currently flowering beautifully. Over in the side return, we've placed wires overhead where we're growing Virginia creeper to create a walkway canopy. It's gradually filling in to create this lovely green tunnel effect. Now, although I love white and green, I really would like to add more color. Living with clay soil and quite a snail population means I don't attempt things like dahlias. But I'm always looking for hardy, colorful plants that can handle our northwest aspect and stand up to the slugs. If you have suggestions for next summer, I'd love to hear them in the comments. This garden continues to teach me about patience, about working with what you have rather than against it. And just like my design work, the best solutions often come from embracing constraints rather than fighting them. The rhythm here changes with seasons, from the first green shoots in early May through to the lush July abundance and the seed heads and structure that will carry us through winter. It is a reminder that creativity, like gardening, isn't about the final result. It's about tending to the process. Thank you for asking to see more. Your curiosity and engagement means so much. If there's anything specific you'd like me to explore in future videos, whether it's seasonal changes, wildlife visitors, or even that tiny greenhouse, let me know below. Until next time, may your creativity grow in whatever space you tend.